Okay, hi guys. Still having a bit of trouble with shadow on my face. I'm not sure what's going on, but welcome to day 2 of Bookmas. Okay, today, let's see. Let's go to the right page. Where? I swear I did my homework. Aha! Found it. The ultimate Christmas gift guide, or whatever this ends up being named. Today I'm going to do a Christmas gift guide from the very young at heart, from infants all the way to adults. And so yeah, hopefully you get some gift ideas. Perspective from where I'm at. I have 2 girls and I read a lot, but I do read a lot of YA and I read a lot of fantasy and I read a lot of historical fiction. So that's kind of the books I've read this year. A lot of the books, either I read them all this year except for one. And I'll get to that one later. And then also a lot of them are newer books because I try to make it relevant and not so much of my favorite books of 2017, which will be coming up later in Bookmas. But these are all the books that I would recommend. Okay, so starting off with infants, honestly, I don't have anything to say here, but let me just give you this word of advice. They listen to anything and they'll let you read anything to them. And right away, when I had my first child, I started reading children's stories to him because I hadn't read them in so long and it was exciting. But at the same time, you forget that you will be reading those for the next 10 years, those same Dr. Seuss and nursery rhymes. So, you could chill out a little bit in the beginning. But at the age, I think 3 months to 7 months, or maybe up to 9 months, depending on the baby and the way they react, they do get involved. And at that point, I would say get them, if you know somebody in that position or somebody who's going to have a baby, I would say get them board books. Board books are awesome, especially the Dr. Seuss one or Dr. Seuss ones, or the P.D. Eastman, Go Dog Go. That was a fan favorite of 1-year-olds around 2-year-olds that I hang out with. But yeah, the Dr. Seuss ones are really pared down Dr. Seuss stories, and they take a minute or less to read some of them, and they're in those little board books, in those little board book box. Those are always a great holiday favorite because those take seconds to read each of those books, which is sometimes all the attention span they have. So those ones that come in a box and they have Disney Princess or Cars or whatever theme is out that year. The next one's for beginner readers and stuff, kindergartners, first graders. I would stick to those beginner reader books with the blue tab on front, and one is 0, I think, and that's before they start reading. And then level 1, I think, is when they start reading very simple words, but they have all the big name brand Disney or Pixar. They have those books for them so they can relate to the movies they're watching and everything. And then they also have some offshoot ones. I think my girls, my older daughter, when she was reading them, she really liked Pinkalicious. I think it was a series of those books. But yeah, you've seen those around. Those are great kids books for the kids those age. Anywhere from 2.5 to 6, 7. I think they really start growing out of them sometime in first grade, really. Okay, but 2 books that are actually just children's books flat out. And then I'm talking kids under 8. It depends on how good of a reader. Kids under 10 would enjoy these books, but I'll do an in-between, a tween one too. But I would say definitely the movie came out this year, so if you haven't read it with your child, it is good to read. Adults enjoy this book as well, and it is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I should know how to say his name. And this is just about a little boy who had a deformed face, and it's funny and sad at times, but he goes to school for the very first time in 5th grade. But the movie's also out, so it's a good one for kids to read and then read the movie. And this is if they're reading what are some famous ones? Diary of the Kids, Dork Diaries, they can probably pick up and read this one, or pretty close to reading this one. The other one I would definitely say is the other movie that came out this year, which was When a Monsters Call. Sorry, I tried to keep these really anybody would like them, whether your kid's into superheroes or princesses or whatever your kid is into, because my girls have been into both. But I try to keep this kind of in the neutral zone. But yeah, so book number 2 for children is definitely When a Monster Calls, and it's just a heartwarming story, and it's written so well, and it's beautiful, and it's nice to listen to, and the pictures are pretty. And that's by Patrick Ness, illustrated by Jim Kay. The original story was by Seaborn David, I think, or I don't remember the original author, but it's a really, really nice story, and it's lovely, and the movie's really good. It's a little bit scary, the movie, but not really. I think kids could see it, definitely. My light needs fixed. Okay, let's go on to tweens. So if you have children and they're really big into Descendants, so Disney's Descendants number 2 came out this summer, and it's a huge thing this Christmas or this holiday season. Some people say it's a little more of a girl, but I don't think so. I think all kind of little tweeners could read it. But there is a little more children's version, I think, that's put out by the movie. But the original book is definitely a tween level reading book. It's the ages 8.5 to 13, somewhere in there, depending on the level of your reader. It's a quite a bit harder than something like Wonder or something like what is that other one? When a Monster Calls. But so it is Isle of the Lost by Melissa De La Cruz, and it is what the original Disney movies are based off of. And it is a trilogy, I think, right now, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But that'd be a really good one for tweens. And then also just for tweens, and so if tweens are reading, this is at the age that they can start reading Harry Potter and The Hobbit, and if they're really good readers, like my nephew's 10, he's read Aragon, and he's read all the Harry Potter series. So I would suggest any of those, and even Hunger Games if they're a more mature reader. And then as well, if you want something new for this Christmas and your kid is into Harry Potter, The Prisoner of Azkaban, the illustrated version, just came out. So if your kid's seen the movies, I'd get it for him. But for me personally, I'd rather have a kid read the books and use their own imagination, develop that world, because I still have the original, like what I thought Harry Potter was in my mind before I saw the movies. So that's always good to do too, if you want to just stick to the original. Okay, got a phone call, sorry. And we're back. Okay, so where were we? We just finished up tweens. So my suggestions were Descendants, Isle of Lost, or the Harry Potter illustrated edition of Prisoner of Azkaban. Okay, so YA. This gets good. Okay, so YA, book number 1 this year. These did not come out this year, but I loved them, and I read them at the beginning of the year. And I think I read this one in particular at the end of last year. But for YA, I would recommend Cinder. It is a Cinderella retelling. I think boys would like this book as well, even though it's a Cinderella retelling. All of them are retellings. Scarlet, I think, is the next one. But they're really good. They're by Marissa Meyer. They're beautiful covers. And I really like this one this year. It was a really good book. And it's a New York Times bestseller, so you know it's going to be good. The other one I read, I checked out from the library, and it was a book that came out, I believe, this summer. And it was called The Words in Blue by Cath Crawley. And it was a really good YA novel. How do I describe it? It was about a kid that looks in a bookshop, and I thought it sounded kind of boring just from that title. And he really loves books, and in this section of the bookshop, people write notes back and forth to each other if they're reading the book at the same time, or people just write notes in these books, and these books cannot be sold. But it's about a young boy and, of course, a young girl, and something more traumatic has happened in her life, but it's done really well. The characters are memorable, and I don't particularly like contemporary YAs, but this one I really liked. So if your kid's not into fantasy, or whoever you're buying for, or if you're buying for yourself in your YA and you're not into fantasy, I would suggest The Words in the Deep Blue. Okay, number 2 is, I guess, fantasy driven as well, and it is Given to the Sea by Mindy McGinnis. This one I read later on in the year, but it would have been a really good summer read. It is quite more lengthy, I believe, and it's a whole intricate story of like a new society, and it's like this little, kind of reminds me of Disney. They just create this whole little castle area where there's a prince, and there's a girl that's supposed to give up her body to the sea to protect this community, and there's all these other stories going on as well, like other people that have other supernatural talents, I guess you would say, but it's really done well, and I liked it, and I can't wait to read the sequel. So it's another really good one for your YA readers. Number 3, of course, or 4. This is number 4 for YA. Number 4 is Replica. Replica is really good. It's done by Lauren Oliver. There was one movie that came out this year by her. Well, movie based on her book, I should say. But it wasn't this one. But Replica was done. It's her newest book, and it's one of the best books I've read by her. It's done so well, and the writing is so unique. It is a bit of a contemporary / dystopian. I don't know. It's a bit of contemporary with something going on behind the scenes. So there was one girl who is raised in an institute, and she is supposedly like a replica or a clone. And then there is one girl that's raised outside of it in just like kind of everyday America. And they're 2 different stories, and the way their minds think are completely different, and the books are split. And then the second one, which I've already read, which just came out about a month ago, it's really good. And it's like every other chapter. Instead of the first original story was one girl's story and then the next girl's story. Okay, so the new adult section. I don't think I have any of the books from new adults either. New adult. So if YA is, I'm giving you ages, but I've honestly read all these books. But if YA is like 13 to 15, new adult I would say is 15 to 22, 23. I'm not sure in there. People that are more mature and can handle heightened, violence and steamy scenes, I guess you'd say. That would be the new adult category. So I put some of these, I don't know if they're new adult, if they're YA, but in my mind, I put them in a new adult. Okay, so one of them is Caraval by Stephanie Gerber. There is an adult kind of book I related to this earlier this year, and I said I liked it more, but I ended up putting Caraval on this list because I can still remember it, and I read it at the beginning of the year, and it's a good story, and I want to read the second one, so I guess that tells you something. But Caraval is about 2 girls that are hidden away on this island. Once again, I think it's not a dystopian really, but just a different land, a different time. It's a little bit of fantasy. But they want to go to this thing called Caraval. Caraval never comes back to that island, so they end up escaping from it and escaping from their father, and they go to this thing called Caraval, and it's an interactive experience of trying to get these clues and trying to make it to the end, and it's done really, really well, so I'd check that one out for the new adult readers. The next one is Hunted by Megan Spooner. I read this one recently, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling for all those people that love retellings. But this one is done really well. Like, I think guys would, out of all the retellings I've read, guys would maybe enjoy this one as much. She's a very aggressive character, but it is the best Beauty and the Beast story I've read. And at the end, the wrap up of what it means to be always wanting something else is a really good ending, like a really good way to relook at the Beauty and the Beast characters. But it's about a girl who wants to be out in the forest, but then again wants to be with her family, and she meets a beast who kind of is split between 2 worlds as well. I would say for YA is Our Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I did read this one this year, but it is not a new book this year, and neither was Hunted. Hunted was not a new book this year, but I did read it, and it was really good, so I would suggest it. I would suggest it in that new adult category. It is a dystopian, so this is for the people that are really into like the Hunger Games and that kind of world. It is definitely a dystopian like that, and it follows a guy and a girl in a dystopian, and it's just like a 2-book series, so it's really quickly read. It's a good story, and yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one to pick up. And then the next one is Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. This one, I don't know if it came out this year. I don't think it did. But the second book just came out, Midnight Jewel, this year. And I read both of them, and they're really good. So this is definitely more female-driven, I'm sorry to say. But it's really good. I love Michelle Reed's writing. She writes YA, and she writes adult, and I don't think she's written children. But this one I definitely would suit in the YA new adult category. But it's about a girl, reminds me back in the day when people used to come from Europe to America, but it's about a girl who joins this company of Glittering Court to get out of her life, and the Glittering Court brings girls to the new world for them to meet suitors that have struck rich, basically, in the new world. And that's what the story is about. The second book is even better than the first. I like the second girl story first. But you have to get through the first book. I guess you could read them out of order. You really could, because I don't think it gives away too much. But yeah. Okay, and then on to adult. So adult, I would really suggest, I mean, new adult could read it, YA could read it, but some of the maturity levels and some of them, maybe not. So for nonfiction, this one could definitely be read by younger ages. So for nonfiction, I picked When Breath Becomes Air. So this is for people who love nonfiction books or maybe read one a year. This would be the one you'd want to read this year or give to somebody. It is written so well, and I've talked about this before. It's by Paul Kalanithi. I think it came out in 2016. It didn't come out in 2017. But it was a bestseller for a long time, and it is just done so well. It's about a neurosurgeon at the end of his life. In the very beginning, you find out he had been diagnosed with cancer, but he used to love to write, and he studied writing, and he's just really good at writing. And it's his little memoir at the end of his life, and it's done really, really well. You'd really like it, and it is on the top best books I read this year by far. It kind of blows most of the books I read out of the water, writing style-wise. Okay, and then I would say Christian for adult or religious or whatever you want to call it. I really liked this one. I think it's in the apologetics section, but yeah. Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. And this one did not come out this year either. He did pass away this year, really sadly. But he did this book a while ago, and it's really good. And it's just about he was brought up in a very strong Muslim family, and like one that has ties to like generations and generations back of being like leaders in the Muslim world. And he goes through a bit of a different adventure in college and finds Jesus, and this is just his testimony story, but it's done really, really well. So I'd suggest this one. It's definitely Christmassy, hence Christmas. But I really like that one. As far as historical fiction, I don't have this book with me, but I do own it. Historical fiction, I usually pick romance, but I picked The Orphan's Tale. It is done so well. I talked about it this summer. It was not a book to read this summer. It is a book to read now. So people who do like historical fiction, I would definitely suggest this. Pam Jenoff, as a writer, she's really easy to read. If you had trouble like getting into Philippa Gregory or getting into that world, like if you like to read it but you've read something like The American Heiress, I would suggest Pam Jenoff, just because she writes simply, she writes compactly. Like, you get enough information. It's not an overload of information, but you get enough about the period to understand what's going on and everything and how people felt. But it's done really, really well. And The Orphan's Tale is about two girls in World War II, and one of them is part of a circus and one of them joins the circus, and they do an act together. So I would definitely suggest those ones. Those ones are really easy if you're just kind of dipping into the historical fiction world. Number 3 or 4, what is it, 3, 4? For fantasy, this isn't really a fantasy book, but I didn't really like a lot of the fantasy books I picked this year. So sometimes I see these books in the fantasy section, so I'm going to cheat. And I'm going to say Voyager, because it just came out on, the series just came out on Stars. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. You don't really have to read the book to pick up this book and read it, because the series are really pretty thorough on what's happening. You wouldn't be lost if you picked this one up and read it, but she does a really good job writing. The books are better than the show, I believe, but they're really good. And this isn't my favorite. I just picked it because it's the series that's going on out this year. And she does have a new book out as part of the Outlander series, and I didn't pick that one either. But my favorite so far has been Dragonfly and Amber, which was number 2 when they go to Paris. So, this is the one book I haven't read. I said I'll get to it later. I don't read mystery. And the books I do read, I'm not very confident in recommending them as a Christmas gift guide, because I don't read enough of them to tell you. I read 60 books this year, and maybe one of them was mystery or thriller. So I went to my friend, that's all she reads. She reads a lot of them, like a lot of them. So I went to her and asked her, and she said it was definitely The Good Girl by Mary Cubica. So for those mystery lovers out there, that's the one I suggest getting for them for Christmas. And then number 1, this is just fiction. I would say tween and up could read this. So a very huge, wide range. So the people who don't know who to buy it for, you don't know what they like, you know that they read, or a person who maybe has read this would probably just want to own the book because it is that good. But my number 1 would say from tween to old adult, whatever you want to call it, I would say is A Man Called O by Frederick Brackman. It is done so well. It is such a cute story. It's an easy story to read. It'd be good to read in the winter because it talks about ice a lot. It seemed like to me it was kind of cold a lot in the book. But it is a really good story. I loved it. And he does a really good job. Even though it's translated, the humor and everything is translated so well. I think the movie doesn't come across that well because the movie has subtitles, which did come out this year. But I think this came out a few years ago, but it was on the bestseller for a long time. And it is definitely one I would definitely recommend as a gift guide. But it's about A Man Called Ove. I say Ove, but I believe the audiobook said oeuvre. And then they pronounced it, I think, a little bit different even on the, because it's just OVE on the movie. But it is just about an old man who has lost his wife. And he's living alone and just going through this period of retiring and losing his wife. But it's just funny. It's so funny. And it reminds you of people in your life. It's really good. Check it out. Or just check it out for yourself, I guess. And that is everything. That's my gift guide for this year. If you want to know more recent books, like if the person's an avid reader, stay tuned for tomorrow. Because tomorrow I'm going to be releasing the new books that were released in December and November. The ones I would recommend or the ones I would be interested in picking up and reading. So that's everything. I hope you enjoyed the second day of Bookmas. Bye.